Member from Prince Edward Hastings.
Thanks, Speaker. My question this morning is for the acting Premier. It's about the Liberals' latest gas plant scandal. The Ontario Energy Board warned the government in 2009, this was back in 2009, that ratepayers could be bilked out of millions, and the Liberals did nothing about it. They warned the Liberals again in 2011, and again, the Liberal government did nothing. Now we know that Goreway wasn't the only gas plant that decided to treat Ontario ratepayers like their own piggy bank. This government tried to hide that for years. Mr. Speaker, this looks like a smokescreen on the part of the government, and it happened under a succession of energy ministers. Both the members from Scarborough Centre and Ottawa West Nepean were ministers of energy during this misappropriation. So, Mr. Speaker, how many Liberals does it take to cover up a $100 million scandal?
The member will withdraw.
Withdraw.
Thank you. Excuse me, without comment. Deputy Premier.
Minister of Economic Development and Growth.
Economic Development and Growth.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Handling another minister's file like this is kind of like being a grandparent in some ways. I get to handle the file and work with you on this today, and then after the weekend, I probably get to hand it back to the minister when I probably had enough of it. So I'm pleased to be acting on behalf of the Minister of Energy today. And again, Mr. Speaker, I mean, let's put this all back into perspective. The IESO was made aware of some potential ineligible costs that have been going on within the system. They fully investigated those costs. They recovered the vast majority of those costs, Mr. Speaker. They levied a $10 million fine, the biggest ever levied in these kinds of circumstances. They posted the report and the record on the OEB website, Mr. Speaker, so it's there for all to see. They've taken steps to ensure that the system's been strengthened so it won't occur again. And, Mr. Speaker, I'll continue more about what some future actions are going to be in the supplementary.
Speaker, the member opposite was the Minister of Energy when some of this gaming was going on, and his seatmate was also a Minister of Energy while this gaming was going on at Goreway. Speaker, this Goreway natural gas plant got the final draft of the report from the OEB in July. The government got the report in September. It was made public November 2nd. But amazingly, the Goreway executive that was helping write the new electricity market rules didn't resign until last Friday. That was after the Cabinet Office had received their advance copy of today's report by the Auditor General. Speaker, if we pulled the phone records for the Energy Ministry and the Cabinet Office for the end of last week, would we find calls to Goreway Power or the IESO pressuring them for a resignation?
Thank you. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this entire process is conducted as appropriately it should be by the IESO, the independent electricity supplier for Ontario, or systems operator for Ontario. I say that because I think a lot of people don't know what the IESO is. Mr. Speaker, their job is to ensure that our electricity system is regulated.
I might get there quicker. Carry on.
Speaker, their job is to ensure that the electricity system is properly regulated. They've done that. They're doing that job. They found some ineligible costs that a company, and in fact there were some other companies, as the member indicated, that may have been here. They've taken action. They've cleaned up the system, Mr. Speaker, strengthened the system to ensure it can't occur in the future, and they've recovered the vast majority of funds, Mr. Speaker.
Final supplementary.
Thanks, Speaker. And the member opposite can try and distance himself from this all he wants, but again, he was the Minister of Energy when this gaming was brought to light by the Energy Board, and so was his seatmate. Speaker, these Liberal scandals have a pattern. First, there's the mind-numbing incompetence. Then there's the lack of oversight. We wonder who's minding the store over there when hundreds of millions of dollars are being wasted in this sector. Then there's the clumsy smokescreen that comes up. Then, like a child called into the principal's office, the government minister hangs their head and tells Ontarians how sorry they are. But because no one's ever held accountable over there by the Premier or anyone in that government, no one actually learns anything, so the same mistakes continue to occur over and over again. There are two former energy ministers in cabinet who both fell asleep at the switch. No one's minding the store. To the acting premier, why are those ministers still in cabinet?
Thank you. Stop the clock, please. Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Minister.
Speaker, I've been pretty forthright in my responses to the member on 2 consecutive questions, and the member persists on trying to get political with this. So, Mr. Speaker, perhaps I should respond in kind. Let me remind that member, Mr. Speaker, that he's part of a party that better be very careful when they're making allegations of exploitation in gaming. When you look at their tabloid, Mr. Speaker, that they recently put out, talk about gaming people, Mr. Speaker, claiming a 22% income tax cut when it's nothing of the sort, Mr. Speaker. You look at that's just a bogus claim. You look further, Mr. Speaker, and you see $12 billion in cuts, none of which are transparent, none of which are defined. Mr. Speaker, what kind of energy programs are they going to cut? What kind of education programs are they going to cut? What kind of health care programs? Mr. Speaker, they're on pretty thin ice over there when they make those kind of political allegations, if you ask me.